Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to something else. Something else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matara, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Arya.
And welcome to episode number 135 of Something Else. Feast your ear holes on this week's episode as we're looking at NWA Total Nonstop action from 22 years ago today, October 23rd, 2002. Joining me, as always, is the Cowboy James Storm to my Wildcat Chris Harris. It's Cyndi. Cyndi, how the heck are you today?
Well, Buckaroo, I'm doing just splendid. I mean, although we watched some real bullshit of a wrestling show these past couple of weeks, hoping to turn it around, Buckaroo. Yeah!
The good news is this week's show is so much better. And even though that is an absurdly low bar to cross, we did cross that. And so, yeah, it is October 23rd, 2002. Back in the day, this was the last TNA show that aired before I turned 18. So if I'd watched this show, this is the last show I could have watched as technically a child. Which, yes, does make me feel old.
Distinctly a child.
Yes. And yes, that does make me feel old because anybody who can do math in their head will tell you that that means that this time next week, I will in fact turn 40. Holy fuck. Oh, I feel old, Cyndi. I feel old.
So do I. But you know what else
Well,
would make us feel older?
Jarrett.
What does his book, quote unquote, have to say about this week in the life of TNA?
So, first of all, this week, he is still convinced, that he can sign a whole bunch of international TV deals that will net them $50,000 per episode. And spoiler alert, I can't say that never happens, but it does not happen until TNA changes the whole way they do business. In fact,
which means
what
it
is
doesn't happen until 2005.
From international deals, I think it's actually later than that. Let me see here. What is 52 times 500,000 or 50,000? Probably should have looked that up here before the episode. 2.6 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, $2.6 million, which honestly I should have figured out in my head, but whatever. Let's be honest, outside of the Spike TV deal, I think the only time they get a international TV deal within that range is when they had that deal in India that was paying them to basically keep them afloat in 2016-ish. That led to them doing the India tour where they had to pay fans to be in attendance.
Well, I'll counter that with something when it comes to TV in India, because I actually did research on this when it originally came up for another podcast that I did. That's the same with all of India TV.
So what you're telling me is we need to start a wrestling show just so we can get it on Indian television and make some money?
I mean, that could be the new home for AEW Shockwave.
There you go. Or maybe since they're actually trying to put Dynamite and Collision on actual TV and not just Triller, maybe they'll actually put Dynamite and Collision on those networks in India and elsewhere. So this week, Jerry Jarrett is losing the power battle. Um, it is Panda Energy has informed Jerry Jarrett that he is no longer going to be head of creative. Jeff is, and Jerry is going to be in the position of COO, whatever that really means. And of course, Jerry correctly realizes that Jeff being in charge of creative really means Russo, and that Russo specifically has been in Dixie's ear. Um, and apparently, and this is where the whole thing is getting weird because we mentioned a week or so ago that the documents had been signed. Pan Energy was now the owner of TNA. However, I guess everything hasn't been closed yet. It hasn't officially been finalized yet. So, Jerry wrote a 12-page letter to one of the executives at Panda Energy, telling the differences between him and WCW, specifically the differences in promoting a successful wrestling business. And I don't know how long the email actually was, but it took up 12 pages of the book. So,
That's overkill.
yeah, yeah, it is definitely something to keep an eye on. I mean, we knew this power struggle was going to happen, and it's obvious, that things are starting to turn in a more Russo-rific direction. And it's gonna come to a head in a few weeks here. But on to the show, you know. By the way, it's 2 days, in case you need to be reminded of what's going on the other channel. It's 2 days after the famous Katie Vick incident on Monday Night Raw, which had Triple H dressed as Kane and having sex with a mannequin in a casket.
And that outfit would soon wind up in the hands of Artie Reynolds and Blade Braxton.
Yes, they bought it when WWE was doing that auction website, and like if I remember the story right, they bid like $200, figuring that, hey, they're just in on the ground floor of it, and then they actually won it because nobody else won that fucking thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and by the way, also in his book, Jerry Jarrett saw this and said that he feels that fans will be so disgusted by WWE, it might encourage them to buy the TNA pay-per-views to see them instead, which I think would be a good theory if they had actual TV and weren't just relying on people to pay $10 a week.
Right. I also remember a time, I think this was in 2003, where they advertised a pay-per-view for 1 cent.
Oh yeah, that's what happens because every year, like they have a week or whatever where for some reason they can't actually do a show, and it's always in the middle of September. And next year is the one where they do a best of show for 1 cent. And we'll get to it. We're not gonna, I can't imagine we'd actually sit here and waste our time recapping it since it is just the best of show, much like the one
No.
back on September 4th. But they did do a 1 cent pay-per-view. And actually, and hey, in case I forgot to mention this a year from now, um, there were some cable systems that did not realize they were only supposed to charge a penny, so they charged people the full $10. And it caused some
Oops.
people to be really upset. Um, by the way, so we're talking about changes at TNA. I'm going to mention some positive ones. We have on-screen graphics, like actual match graphics, like you see on every wrestling TV show
Mm-hmm.
since like 1990. I mean, I'm sure it was earlier than this, but I'm thinking of like Nitro, but going back actually probably to the 80s. You know, we finally have actual on-screen graphics building up the matches. So hooray. And also, and this keeps telling you how wrong I am, Scott Hall is back. I legitimately thought that we didn't see him again until 2004, but no, he's back. Um, but I swear, at some point, I'm serious here, at some point, Scott Hall's going to stop showing up until 2004. I promise. But, since so far I've looked like a liar, who the hell's going to believe me? So this week's show, it starts off with a five-way elimination X-Division match. Amazing Red versus Kid Cash versus Jose Maximo versus Joel Maximo versus Primetime Elix Skipper. All five men literally ran to the ring to the TNA theme song, the one you hear at the beginning of this show after the Bill Alfonso intro. They literally ran to the ring and started the match. Um, Tenay explains that this is under Lucha Libre rules, so no tagging is necessary, and the winner gets an X Division title match next week. Now, for those who remember from last week's episode, this is the match that Jerry Jarrett replaced the Norman Smiley Ron Harris rematch with. And I hope everyone's sitting down because the change was for the better. Cyndi, I know you're stunned that this X Division 5 would be better than Norman Smiley versus Ron Harris.
Yeah, it was interesting, but you know what? I'm good on it.
Now, while I typed that paragraph out, about 53 things happen in the match, including Red doing a flip dive out of the ring onto everyone, and then Kid Cash running into the ring before running back out of the ring with his own flip dive. At one point, we got a wacky submission hold that required me to press pause to write down what happened.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes. Jose simultaneously had a Boston Crab on Amazing Red and a gory special on Kid Cash, while Joel had a camel clutch on Amazing Red and Skipper had a camel clutch on Joel. Got that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So there are some production changes on the show. Some are for the better, some are not so much. And one of them was the debut of picture-in-picture replays, which does not sound like a bad thing at all, except for some reason they do a bright flashing light on the upper corner of the screen when they go in and out of the picture-in-picture.
That is very distracting, by the way.
Yes, disturbing, distracting, many words that start with the word dis. Literally, this is what happens. This match is what happens when you try to protect almost everybody, because no one person got to have like that dominant string of eliminations. No one person was able to get two. What happened was the person A would beat person B, they would get beat by person C, who got beat by person D, who got beat by person E. And in this case, the biggest jobber on the show was Jose Maximo, since he was the only person in the match who didn't get to beat anybody. He was pinned by Elix, who was pinned by Joel, who was pinned by Cash, who was pinned by our winner, the Amazing Red. I will say, even though I'm kind of blowing it off and I mentioned, whatnot, this was really good, especially when it got down to Cash and Red. They hit a series of high risk moves on each other, and Red won with the infrared. And as we've mentioned before, it is usually a good sign for the show when we start with a fun X Division match, and that's what this was.
Because we started the last two shows with some not good stuff.
Yes. So non-fun X Division matches.
Yeah.
Yes. Was it one of them, the fucking Brian Lawler match? For some reason. I'm sure Brian Lawler was in the opener one week.
Lawler versus David Young.
Yes. So I gave this match a 7.0 out of 10, and I think, and I'll have to double check, but I think this is the highest rated match I gave for the week.
That's exactly what I gave it too. 7 out of 10. I said, finally, a show that starts off hot after all the crap from the past 2 weeks.
Yes. By sheer dumb luck, they're starting the show off well.
Yep. So when we talk about these shows beforehand, and I mentioned this to you. This is the show of really weird promos. Many weird promos. So we have Goldilocks. He's trying to interview Brian Lawler about his match with BG James, but apparently he's more preoccupied about something. It turns out to be April has not arrived yet, I guess.
Yep.
So he shouts at Goldilocks, and then I think remember a couple of weeks ago how we thought Lynn was bipolar.
They need to spread the
with yeah.
The lithium needs to be spread around the locker room at this point. Brian Lawler mellows out immediately and asks if we can do this later and walks off.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to note, obviously we're talking about a show from 2002, and if I don't bring up certain things that happen in real life, you may not really accept that this is 2002. So they announced that they're doing a silent auction where the money that gets paid to win various items will be donated to the reward fund to capture the DC sniper. Because that's what's going on at this point.
Yep. And one of the things that they gave away was a fishing trip with Jeff Jarrett.
See, that wasn't even the one that I was thinking of. I was kind of ignoring the bottom line crawls for a while, but then at one point, I saw the corner of my eye, spend a day being Vince Russo's assistant. I want it so bad to go back and donate money and become Russo's assistant, even if just to spend money to bug the fuck out of him. And he couldn't do a damn thing about it outside of trying to get me to leave him the fuck alone. I think that would just be tremendous.
I'd pay $99 to see that.
World Tag Team Champions Chris Harris and James Storm versus the Hot Shots. We are on AMW Watch Week 18. Harris and Storm are still Harris and Storm. However, when they win this match, spoiler alert, Tenay says that the fans have dubbed them America's Most Wanted. So we are agonizingly close to them being America's Most Wanted. So remember when I said the first match began with all 5 people running to the ring? This match begins with Harrison Storm running to the ring. What the hell is going on today? Did everyone get time cut and they couldn't walk the 20 feet from the staging area to the ring?
Well, there's storyline reason for this, because this was kind of a blood feud, because remember, episode 3, the Hot Shots took out Harrison Storm from the tag title tournament. Now Harrison Storm have the belts. The Hot Shots help beat down Harrison Storm after Harrison Storm beat the Michaels boys. And so this was kind of the culmination of it.
With an asterisk.
Yeah.
So all 4 men are doing main event brawling outside the ring and around the audience. I wrote that I'm not sure if this is allowed since it's second on the card and they're not the main event, but apparently it was okay. Chase Stevens goes for a springboard something off the guardrail, but Storm laid him out with a power bomb. The timekeeper Tiny ran away as Harris and Riley fought near the announce table. And then this crazy 4-way brawl breaks down into a tag team match. And Harris gives Stevens a spear, makes the hot tag to Storm. Storm runs wild on both men, including a drop toe hold, sending Riley's head into Stevens' crotch. Harris goes for the catatonic on Riley, but Stevens hits him with a super kick. But then Storm pins Riley with the move known as the 8-second ride, which he rarely ever uses again.
Yeah, because he mainly just uses Eye of the Storm or the last call super kick.
The last call, or as a team, their finish is the death sentence, which I don't know if I'm sure they've done it already, but it comes back soon, I promise.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's a fine match. I give it a 4.5 out of 10.
I gave it a little bit higher than that. I gave it a 5. I called it a glorified squash match.
So then we got the TNA Holocaust video package of the week. It centered around the feud between Sonny Siaki and Jerry Lynn, which featured them replaying Sonny Siaki saying Sonny Siaki approximately 35 times. And I had to ask, did that count for the Sonny Siaki counter?
Promo package does not count.
Okay. By the way, I think I found out who does these Holocaust video packages, and believe it or not, it's Borash. Because there's a video package next week that's stylized like this that doesn't play due to technical difficulties. And spoiler alert, a week ahead of time, Jarrett in his book said that it was too bad that JB's video package didn't get to play due to technical issues. So obviously this was before JB learned how to edit the video together.
I bet his Windows Movie Maker was working so hard.
I bet. Goldilocks, who looked like she was wearing a burlap sack, interviewed Jerry Lynn. Lynn said that he's wrestling with a bum knee and how all the young guys want to use him as a stepping stone. And when he leaves, Brian Lawler wanders into the front of the camera and then walks off, leaving Goldilocks disgusted.
This is weird promo number 2 of the night. Like, he talks about Jerry Lynn, and this is when we get more bipolar now. Most of the time, Jerry Lynn was kind of mumbling, he's a professional wrestler, it's what I do, we got to keep plugging away, I'm a professional wrestler, I'm not going to stop this match, I'm a professional wrestler, blah, 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 blah. Where is the lithium? I mean, can we get these people like some... Well, let me take a look at my counter. Yeah, there's some citalopram here they could have.
Are you gonna jump in a TARDIS, take it back in time, and give it to some of these guys?
No, because I'm afraid some of them would snort it.
Oh, we'll get to some. We'll get to at least one person who did a lot of drugs on this show, allegedly. But
And
first
it's
we're
not
gonna go
Sonny
to
Siaki.
No. I mean, he may have, but he handles his drugs better. So, but we're going to Sonny Siaki versus Jerry Lynn. This feud's been going on since September 18th when Siaki cost Lynn the world title, and Siaki injured Lynn a few weeks ago. So remember how the 5 people in the X-Division match and then Harrison Storm both ran to the ring? And then do you remember how Jerry Lynn has an injured knee? Jerry Lynn speed walks to the ring to start the match. And we get more main event brawling. Main event brawling being described as brawling around the arena. The bell did not ring, though, so these two men are just fighting over the arena for the hell of it. Don West at one point says Lynn is like Barry Bonds, only getting better with age. And I'm like, does this mean Lynn is on the juice? Finally, the bell rings.
Hold it. I'm laughing because, hold on, I'm going to send you over Messenger. This is exactly what I have in my notes.
Jerry Lynn is like Barry Bonds as he gets better with age. As far as we know, Lynn hasn't taken steroids. See?
Yep.
Great minds think alike here.
Yep.
Finally, the bell rings with both men finally getting into the ring. Lynn went for a big body slam, but his knee gives way, and Siaki falls on top of him. I got to say, the knee didn't bother him all that much when he was speed walking to the ring or when he dove over the guardrail. Siaki clips the knee and slaps on the worst-looking figure 4 of all time up to this point. Tenay and West spend too much time talking about how Lynn doesn't have a chance, so telegraphs what happens, which is Lynn rolling up Siaki for the win.
Question for you about that figure 4. Who did the figure 4 the worst? Sonny Siaki or Brian Cox?
Siaki, just because he's a trained professional wrestler.
Agreed, because at least Brian Cox's figure 4 actually looked like it was applied correctly.
Honestly, them and Hogan, are the all-time worst figure fours.
Yeah.
Actually, Anderson Silva in the fight he lost to Chris Weidman also had a pretty bad-looking figure four, but at least that was a shoot, brother.
I thought this was more of an
So
angle than a match anyway.
honestly, I looked at it as more of a match than an angle, and I mean, even though Siaki attacks him after the match and puts him in a one-legged crab before the referees pull him off, I will say that Lynn has solved the mystery of having a good singles match with Sonny Siaki. Jerry Lynn is the MVP of TNA by far. I gave the match a 6.0 out of 10.
I didn't like as much as you did. I gave it it's another 5 for me. Mainly because I don't know, Siaki is fine. Jerry Lynn is fine. As you said, is MVP. However, I do kind of wish that Lynn got a little more offense in than he did during the match. To me, it was more like 4 minutes of Jerry Lynn on his back, just taking punishment on his leg for too long. And then he gets one boot up the butt and rolled up for the 3. That's why I called it more angle than a match.
So they announced that due to the shenanigans in the 2 title matches last week, Bullet Bob Armstrong may have a major announcement next week as it pertains to the shenanigans of those matches. Now, keep in mind, Bullet Bob, who is in charge, theoretically, booked 3 title matches this week, despite needing to wait until next week to make a major announcement about last week's matches. I love Bullet Bob. You can hear how much I love Bullet Bob on the Smoky Mountain Show, but they are doing their best to castrate poor Bullet Bob.
Oh yeah, they are. But they kind of do that. They did that with almost every single authority figure. Like they kind of did it with Steamboat because he wanted more than $100. Jim Miller was fine, and I guess they thought he was too bland. Bill Behrens did it to himself. Big
Bad,
bad boy
bad
Billy
boy.
Behrens,
Yes.
and it gets pretty bad from there. Um, we have another Holocaust promo apparently.
I actually didn't even write it down. What
Uh,
was it about?
Hennig and Killings last week.
Ah, so yeah, I only make a note of one Holocaust promo, I guess. But I think we need to go back and rewatch that instead of what happens next. Because what happens next,
Oh God, weird promo number 3.
and that's being polite about this. Curt Hennig and BG James come to the ring for a promo. I don't know how many different drugs Hennig is on this week, but I theorize a lot because good Lord, good fucking Lord, this promo. Hennig says that ever since he became a wrestler, he has found that wrestlers all around the world want to be like him. He starts talking about, and I quote, the mark who tried stealing his gimmick, and I and you and Trey, when I brought this up to him, all thought he was talking about Sean Stasiak, who Russo booked to have a Mr. Perfect gimmick in WCW.
Yeah,
But no, he was talking about Diamond Dallas Page.
I have
And
no idea why.
what fucking gimmick of his did DDP steal?
I have written down maybe the hair, but that's because DDP's hair was always scraggly. It's just that he had it poofed in the mid '90s.
Parent, I mean, I'll be honest, there's literally nothing else that I could sit here and say that Diamond Dallas Page and Curt Hennig have in common? Like, I, I can't even hazard a fucking guess. And I'm me. I know so much about wrestling that Dave Meltzer sits and thinks that I know too much. And I cannot even fathom what the fuck he's talking about. And by the way, this is not going to be the last time he brings this up either. Just want to say that. So Hennig then starts talking about Jeff Jarrett. And he said that when Jarrett was a rookie, he kicked Jarrett's ass. And then Hennig did the West Texas Rednecks, and that was successful. So the next thing you know, Jeff Jarrett was a country music wannabe. It, ignoring the fact, of course, that, Jarrett was a country music wannabe 5 years before they did the West Texas Rednecks gimmick.
6 years, actually, 6. Because he started this gimmick like mid-93.
Yeah. But then it's like, oh, I was on TV with a guitar, so the next thing you saw was Jeff Jarrett hitting people with guitars.
And he was doing that before the West Texas Rednecks. He started doing that in like 98.
Yeah, he did, because he did it to fucking X-Pac, because that's how they built up the feud for SummerSlam. Plus, if you want to go back even further, Honky Tonk Man did it to Jake Roberts in 1987 to build up WrestleMania 3, which is 12 years before the West Texas Redneck.
Hennig is on all of the drugs.
But then, we got the greatest unintentional bit of comedy in TNA history. Because we've mentioned the production team can be better. And they're working at it.
Oh, you're forgetting something. The one thing that he has, it was probably the last big thing he did in wrestling.
That's still to come. This is after.
It was now. It was now before coming up. He says that. I think both of us are getting confused. You go first, then I'll do the line.
Okay. So before he says the line, he informs the camera person, the hard camera, to zoom in on his face. The hard camera proceeded to zoom in so far that they zoomed in on his nose, eyes, and forehead. And I'm sitting here and I'm still chuckling about it. I could not stop laughing. I had to press pause and rewind because I just saw Curt Hennig's entire top half of his face filling up my giant ass TV.
This was awful. You sent me a photo of this.
There is there was a sitcom back in the 90s with Al Franken, who, is a political commentator, and he was also a senator in Minnesota briefly. Mm-hmm. And at one point, they were doing a news show, and it was going so bad that one of the people in the production room wanted the guy and head of production to zoom in on Al. And so the guy, just to amuse himself, said, sure, why not? And zoomed in so tight on Al's face. And that was intentionally funny. That was intentional comedy. This was done because the production team does not quite know what they're doing yet. Which is funny because they got the old WCW production team, which theoretically does know what they're doing. But then, with us looking at Curt Hennig's face, or at least half of Curt Hennig's face, he then starts talking about how he took Brock Lesnar down on an airplane, and then says he wants to wrestle Jeff Jarrett next week because he took Brock Lesnar down at 35,000 feet. And then he's talked about what he's going to do to Jarrett, and I quote, at ground zero.
Yep. Oh, brother.
And this, by the way, this thing with him taking down Brock Lesnar at 35,000 feet, he is going to bring this up a lot. And yeah, sure. By the way, Brock Lesnar is, of course, the WWE champion at this point. So it's like, okay. But it's like also anybody who cared to know what the real story would have already known what the real story here was. And, but whatever. So at this point, Jeff Jarrett's music played, but Jarrett didn't go out. Instead, we go to the back where Jarrett was trying to get Brian Lawler to come out and help him, but Brian said he wouldn't because he's waiting for April and told him to go get the truth. Back in the ring, BG mentions he's wrestling Lawler tonight, and that's it.
He also quips, and this line kind of got me laughing because apparently BG and Hennig saw that little backstage skirmish, or they heard it at least. BG quips that it looks like Lawler's waiting for April. Well, he's going to have to wait a few months until April. My math isn't that good.
That may have been the most creative thing said in this segment, and that's really saying something.
Mm-hmm.
So BG and Curt Hennig walk to the back, and out walks Scott Hall. Because after one weird talking segment, we have to have multiple weird talking segments. Scott Hall, who, by the way, hasn't been here in 3 weeks, despite being advertised for multiple of the shows, is here. He says he's supposed to be out here later, but he isn't good at following rules and directions. He stumbles over his words, saying he isn't a good boy. And then, despite not being a good boy, he wants Jarrett now. I think whatever drugs Hennig didn't take, Hall took.
That is putting it lightly. And he says he's not been a good boy. He admits that, but he wants Jarrett now, and we get it now.
Indeed. So we get Scott Hall versus Jeff Jarrett. This rivalry goes back to week 1 when Hall and Toby Keith eliminated Jarrett from the Battle Royal. Jarrett runs down to the ring to start the match because somebody has to run to the ring in every fucking match. Jarrett goes for the crossbody, but of course you don't powerbomb Kidman and you don't try to give a crossbody to Scott Hall because he will catch you and do the sack of shit slam. Jarrett decides to just leave and learn to fight another day or live to fight another day, but Hall follows and we have main event brawling. Hall and Jarrett brawl in the crowd, up and down the bleachers, back into the ring. Scott Hall goes for the outsider's edge near the ropes. Now, you don't powerbomb Kidman, you don't crossbody Scott Hall, and if you're Scott Hall, you do not give somebody the outsider's edge near the ropes. You would think at this point he would stop trying to do the outsider's edge near the ropes, because every single time he does, and I mean, hey, if this didn't happen, what the hell would happen? Every single time he does, he gets backdropped over the top rope. Every wrestler has a favorite spot. His is being backdropped when going for the edge near the ropes.
Mm-hmm.
Since there are no rules on the floor, not that there's really any rules in this company at all, Jarrett hits Hall with the ring steps and then a chair. Jarrett hits the referee with a clothesline to get back in the ring. He grabs a chair. Hall slaps the referee to wake him up. Jarrett brains him with the chair, but Hall is the smartest person on this show because he becomes the first person to ever get his hands up. And not only did he get his hands up, he got both of his arms in the way of Jeff Jarrett's chair shot, which, again, the smartest thing that the smartest thing Scott Hall has ever done. In runs Curt Hennig, who attacks Jarrett. The lights go out for a second, and then they pay the light bill because they come back on. Ron Killings is suddenly backstage cutting a promo on Curt Hennig. We needed the lights to go out for that, apparently. He says that he will be in Hennig's ass like a rectal thermometer. I don't even know what that means. And I hope
it's not going to be pleasant.
Yeah, I hope not anyway. Back in the ring, Brian Lawler attacks Hennig from behind. BG James then runs in and runs off Lawler. Hennig low blows Jarrett. Hall hits the edge, and Hall picks up the win in a massive clusterfuck that I still gave 3.5 out of 10 to.
I was like, finally, Jarrett loses to Scott Hall. Like, how many? Like, I'm taking a look at the cage match stuff. I'm looking at how many times Jarrett beat Scott Hall. Like, the
In
last
TNA
time.
or just in general?
In TNA. Like,
Okay.
Scott Hall beat Jeff Jarrett only twice. And that one time was in episode 2.
I was gonna say, wasn't it when Toby Keith and all them interfered? Yeah. But see, I know that because this feud's been going on since June, and it like Brian Lawler at one point was his tag team partner, and then Brian Lawler, turned on him, but I don't know how much that necessarily counts, but hey, we're gonna go with it.
Mm-hmm. So
Um,
that kind of sets up next week's world title match between Killings and Hall. I gave this, I wrote down I gave it a 6, but looking back on it, it was more 4. I think I gave it 2 bonus points because Jarrett actually lost the match.
Spoiler alert on who wins the world title match main event, or at least who leaves with the belts, I guess is more of a specific answer here. So then 1 minute ago, Brian Lawler and BG James ran away, and now they've turned around to walk right back out. Brian Lawler versus BG James. The match starts the same way every match has started. This time with BG running to the ring to start the match. They fight into the crowd. So for the 4th time tonight, we have main event brawling. I get, this company may not have, the most attention to detail at this point, but you think someone would be like, hey, we sure have a lot of matches starting the same exact way this week. Maybe don't do that. So outside the ring, Lawler wins a fight with a fan to get a chair, but he gets hit with it. I will say that, and God knows I don't want to have to examine his brain after he died, but Brian Lawler does a great concussion sell. Whether or not he was actually concussed, I don't know. But like when he gets hit with a chair, it's like you believe that man got fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
So back in the ring, BG goes for a gay anal sex, but Brian Lawler fights out of it, which keep in mind, as we learned a few weeks ago, that, it's okay as long as the other person doesn't enjoy it. He hits a super kick before going. By the way, that was a really nice super kick too. Like I don't remember ever seeing Brian Lawler do a super kick, but he really should have made that part of his regular arsenal because I thought that looked really good. But anyway, he goes to the top rope for what was theoretically the Tennessee Jam, but before he could come off, April arrives and her and Syxx-Pac come out on the ramp. Syxx begins making out with April, so Brian crotches himself and BG puts his arm on top for the pin. Of all the matches we've had on this show, this was certainly one of them.
Yeah, it wasn't good at all.
No. And hilariously, considering one of the matches still have to come, or just listening to what the match is, this was the worst match on the show, in my not so humble opinion. I gave it a 2.0 out of 10, which, by the way, is still a lot better than we've had on some of these shows.
That's exactly what I gave it, 2 out of 10.
Yeah. All right. So X-Division champ.
So after the match, BG was actually holding Brian Lawler back while Syxx is just wearing the mouth out of April. And Lawler just go,
Is
so
that what he was doing?
yeah, pretty much. He became a whimpering loser.
Now, if Rick Martel was here, would you have called him a loser?
That's one
Sorry,
of
I've
the
been.
careers that I wish didn't end the way it did.
So you didn't want his career to be ended by getting injured by Stevie Ray?
No, I would have liked to see him like retire in dignity. Like he had a good tag TV title thing going, and then he told like, what he blew out
I,
his knee
I believe so, yes.
at Super Brawl
Yes, with Booker
because
T.
yeah, and then Stevie Ray concusses him, and that's the end of that.
He was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm done. Uh, I'm sure he didn't really say that, but going through all these old pay-per-views, I just was like, I was going through WrestleMania 5 today while doing my proofreading, and yeah, I was rereading the Rick Martel promo after he turned on Tito Santana and called him a loser.
That's the French Canadian accent coming out from Martel, and
Do you remember or know that he was managed briefly by Slick?
yeah,
Uh,
SummerSlam '89.
yeah. It's like I know what happened, like 'cause it's in the back of my head, but every time I'd see it, it's like that doesn't make any sense. It's like Slick did not manage Rick Martel, but he did. Oh. So Syxx-Pac was up next, defending the X-Division title against AJ Styles with Mortimer Plumtree in his corner. And thanks to some pre-match mic work, this was a no disqualification match. And before Pac even took the mic to make that announcement, I wrote prediction. Brian Lawler comes out and costs Pac the championship. I don't think I was Nostradamus by predicting that.
Nope, not in the slightest.
Um,
Did you
so
note the headband that Syxx was wearing?
didn't it have like Japanese writing on it?
I had it here. It's like the one that Piston Hondo wore during title defense mode and Punch Out for the Wii.
I did not play Punch Out on the Wii. In fact, I did. My roommate had a Wii, but they really didn't play it that much outside of Wii Sports.
A lot of people bought Wii's either just to play the pack in Wii Sports, or it was a great Netflix machine back in the day.
I believe it. You know, that was right around the time when they started putting apps on video game systems. So yeah, makes total sense.
Like
So by the way,
I
when Mhm.
worked at Nintendo in 2015. I worked the call center, and a lot of the calls was helping them connect the internet to the old Wii because a lot of churches use Wii's for Netflix and stuff like that.
Did you say a lot of churches used the Wii for Netflix?
Yeah,
Okay, whatever.
true story.
No shame in their game, at least in that regards.
I mean, this was before PureFlix was a thing, so in order to watch all your wholesome Christian movies, you had to go to Netflix.
What the fuck is PureFlix?
Think Netflix for all these awful Christian movies.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Shout out to
Some
God awful movies.
Somehow I've managed to not realize that was a thing. All right. So back to Syxx-Pac versus AJ Styles. Syxx-Pac says that this will be a no disqualification match and he will whip Mortimer's ass if he gets involved. So Mortimer joins the commentary table because, hey, I don't want to get my ass kicked either. So why the hell not? Um, AJ at one point hits the spiral tap, but only gets a 2 count, which I think, actually, no, it's not the first time someone kicked out of it, but it's maybe the second time someone's kicked out of it on this show.
Mhm.
AJ does his backflip scorpion death drop gimmick on Pac and uses the Bronco Buster, but celebrates on the middle rope. So, I'm sorry, Pac uses the Bronco Buster and celebrates on the middle rope. So AJ hits a power bomb off of the ropes. Pac fights back and hits the X Factor, but Mortimer grabs the referee. So Pac lived up to his promise and knocked Mortimer the fuck out. AJ goes for a Styles Clash, but Pac gets to the ropes. Brian Lawler runs down and broke something. I think it was supposed to be a glass bottle, but no one seemed to know for sure. He broke something over the head of Pac, and so AJ hits the Styles Clash and becomes a 2-time X-Division champion. And unlike the last time AJ Styles cheated to win the X-Division title, like 3 weeks ago, this time the title change was not overturned. Yay for inconsistency. Now, despite the fact that AJ Styles just cheated to win the title, Pac raised AJ's hand in victory after AJ beat him. And while he did that, AJ surreptitiously handed Brian Lawler the title belt behind his back, and Brian knocked Pac the fuck out with it. I did write that this was a pretty good match until the predictable finish, 6.5 out of 10.
I gave it a 7 out of 10. I liked it a little bit more than you did. I thought it was a can of beer that Brian Lawler hit Syxx with.
Maybe, but I thought I saw something break.
I just saw suds and I thought it was more like a can.
Maybe. Who knows? But yeah, so yeah, the X Division title reign of Syxx-Pac, which began with him interfering in a match that he was not in, lasted what, 2 weeks?
Yep, 2 weeks. A wrong has been righted.
Yes. But yeah, so like I said, I liked the match until the finish. We'll say that. So up next. Up next was a match that on the surface sounds like a worst match of the year contender. Ace Steel, who I'm sure people who actually care will flood my inbox and tell me that I'm wrong. Ace Steel's a great worker, yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? He sucked last week. He had a really shitty match last week. And he's wrestling Jorge Estrada, who is, to put generously, the most inconsistent of the 3 flying Elvises. The greenest, most inconsistent, yada, yada, yada. So I came into this match expecting shit. And with that said, this match was a lot better than shit.
Mm-hmm.
Mortimer was backstage celebrating the X-Division title win, so Ace is out here on his own. 30 seconds into the match, Ace tapped out to a hammerlock, but that wasn't the finish, so the referee didn't call it. And this wasn't David Sammartino submitting to a bear hug that they couldn't ignore. Ace nails a dropkick from the middle rope, which sent Jorge outside, and then Ace flew out of the ring with a suicide dive. Priscilla gets into Ace's face. Now, in 1987, when the Honky Tonk Man was trying to smash Macho Man Randy Savage with a guitar, while Savage was being held by Brett and Jim Neidhart. By the way, another time a guitar was smashed on television before Curt Hennig showed up with it. When Honky Tonk Man got confronted by Elizabeth, or not so much confronted, but Elizabeth got in the way and begged him not to do it, and Honky shoved her down. This was a superheated angle that led to 6 months of pretty good drawing house shows between Savage and Honky. In 2002, Priscilla gets in Ace Steel's face, and Ace throws her down, and nobody, including Jorge, gave a single fuck. Back in the ring, Priscilla trips Ace, letting Jorge pick up the win with a schoolboy. After the match, Mortimer Plumtree runs down and argues with Priscilla. While Ace punches Jorge, Priscilla jumps on Mortimer's back before being thrown off. That was sold 10 times more than when the actual trained professional wrestler shoved her down 2 minutes earlier.
Yep.
Now, I will say that this match was unnecessary for a number of reasons. It is better than Ace's match last week, even though that is a pretty low bar to cross. I gave it a 3.5 out of 10.
I thought it was a decent match. It was in a dead spot, honestly. It was better than what was going to come up. I gave it a 4.
Unless we're talking about the promo, I thought it was just as good as what's coming up.
Weird promo number 4.
Syxx-Pac is introduced to the ring, and the former X-Division champion has something to say. Pac says that there's a lot of reasons why he lost the title tonight. He lost to AJ because AJ is a world-class wrestler and because he was too worried about screwing with Brian Lawler and his woman, and that cost him. Pac said that April is hot and a nice piece of ass, but he wants to settle this with Brian Lawler right now, and whoever kicks the ass of the other gets April tonight. Lawler comes out and says the fight's over. April is used, she's a piece of trash, and Syxx-Pac can have her. And that explains why Lawler spent the last 3 months obsessing over her. Anyway, April comes out and said Syxx forced her to do that, and that she still loved Brian. This caused Brian to charge the ring and attack Syxx. Security runs in and breaks it up. And yeah. This is a weird-ass storyline.
Yeah, Lawler went all Super Saiyan. They brawl like never since the last time we've seen a brawl in a match, which was about 10 minutes ago. But now we get to one of my favorite parts of the show. Don West hype.
Yes. Don West gives us the hard sell for next week. We're going to have a mixed tag match with Jorge Estrada and Priscilla versus Mortimer Plumtree and Ace Steel. We're going to have Syxx-Pac versus Brian Lawler. We're going to have Jeff Jarrett versus Curt Hennig. Ron Killings versus Scott Hall. Harris and Storm will defend their titles. And we're also going to have AJ Styles versus the Amazing Red for the X-Division title. I don't care what you think about the first 5 matches that I mentioned. That 6th match is the one to watch the show next week for.
Yep.
And by the way, of those 6 matches, one of them doesn't happen, and one of them doesn't happen as advertised. And at least for the one that doesn't happen, there was a reason for that. There wasn't just false advertising, although, believe me, no one who bought the show bought it specifically for either of those matches.
Yeah.
Now, World Heavyweight Champion Ron the Truth Killings versus Curt Hennig. Good news, Hennig did not run to the ring. Hennig jogged to the ring. He throws his towel of truth and the match is on. And yes, it's time for more main event brawling. They fight around the ringside area. And then Hennig just drags Truth back over. Killings chokes Hennig with the camera cable and stares right at the NWA title while doing it. They exchange chops before Hennig intentionally kicks him in the balls, which was not a disqualification. Killings goes heads first off of the ring post when suddenly Mr. Wrestling 3 runs into the ring, but Hennig gives 3 a running knee lift. Curt tries to take the mask off, but Truth hits Hennig with some kind of international object to pick up the win. I wrote it was at least better than last week.
Oh, thank God it was better than last week, but not by much, though.
I gave this match a 3.5 out of 10.
I gave it a 3.5 as well.
See, great minds thinking alike. We've been on the same stream here for a little while now.
Yeah. But finally, thank God.
The actual last thing on the show. The Disciples of the New Church theme song plays. And you may recall they have not been around in, I don't know, 5 weeks, pretty much since AMW won the tag titles and then beat them the next week in a tables match. I think that was pretty much it for the Disciples of the New Church. But in the closing seconds of this show, we have a cute little video package that says that Evil is returning on October 30th. Now, personally, you would think that they would have played this last week as well, so they could like really build this up. But I guess it's better to have built it up a little bit than to built it up not at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the show goes off the air, and at least this means I don't want to say fresh blood because we've seen the Disciples of the New Church before, but we're working in some talent. We're mixing things up, and that's always a good thing.
Yep, because I'm kind of tired of the hot shots.
Yeah. And we still have one more week of the hot shots. Well, actually, I haven't looked. I think the hot shots are around more than that, but we have at least one more week of Harrison Storm versus the hot shot. Spoiler alert. But final ratings of this week's show, match quality rate averaged out at a 4.56. Overall enjoyment, I gave a 5.5. Much better than the last 2 weeks. Not that that's saying a whole lot, because again, those were two of the worst shows ever. And future build, 7.0 out of 10. I want to see AJ Styles versus Amazing Red next week. And since Red is pretty low in the totem pole, I'm confident that Russo is going to leave it alone and just let them have a match. And that gives us an overall rating of 5.69, which doesn't sound like much, but it's still on the higher end of these shows we've been watching.
I gave it a show grade of 7 out of 10. I was kind of attracted to the weirdness of some of the promos.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? It was pretty good. I was fine with it.
Yeah.
What I order next week,
with the
7 out of 10. Yeah. 7 out of 10 I say for next week because of Styles versus Red.
Yeah. You cannot go wrong by promising us a fucking amazing match, especially if you deliver on that fucking amazing match.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to bring us to an end of this week's show. Any final thoughts about this show?
We're finally off the Schneid. And it looks like they
Hopefully.
filled up the second row. And there are people actually bringing in decent signs.
A lot of smart mark signs, but yeah, it's better than it has been. And even though the production could be a lot better, it has gotten better than it has been. So thank you, Dixie Carter, for convincing your daddy to put some money into the production budget. But before we finish things up, do you want to plug anything?
Yes. I have been doing Perler Beat art. I'm thinking about starting up an Instagram to show off some Perler Beat art. I do video game characters mainly. So I might start up an Instagram about that.
Awesome. Well, stay tuned for that. And I want to thank everyone for listening. Hope you all enjoyed the show. And we'll talk to you again in 7 days.